depending on the time zone you are tuning in. Anna Achimowicz back with you from Rock Dance Theater Live TV, Rebel Crush, and Performing Arts Medicine. That's a handful. Before we start into Best Bass in the Books, another chapter, please do all of the good stuff, meaning the likes, the subscribes, and all of that, while I sit back and drink coffee. And I think you've done the right thing. So today, not only will be extending a little bit on the bass discussion, but my very special guest in discussion today is Joel McIver, the man that doesn't need any introduction. He's an esteemed writer. He's the editor of Bass Player magazine, writer, co-writer, author extraordinaire, and also a bass player, I've heard. So I would love for him to join me in discussion, and let's have a nice little chat and hang out. If you guys are thirsty, settle up, get your coffee, get your beverages, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. In other words, Joel McIver, welcome into the live chat.
What an introduction. That's amazing. Thank you. How nice to be here.
You know what, Joel? Hello, welcome.
Thank
the
you.
first thing with your name is actually every time I do see your name, I want to say Joel McIver.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got that ever.
So every American that I've ever dealt with pronounces my name, which is McIver, right? Yeah.
Right.
Because it's like the TV show, which was so popular
Almost.
in the 80s. Yeah. But I don't blame them. You know, it's a cool program and it's inevitable. So all is good.
It's pretty cool. I mean, imagine turning lyrics, putting albums together, putting articles together like out of nowhere, like McIver did, like a piece of Scotch tape, shebang, it's done.
I'll take it. You know? Yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely. Please take it as a compliment.
Everything around here is held together by Scotch tapes. That makes sense.
Well, you know what? I have to say that I think the last 2 years of all of us in the pandemic, the word that we do not pronounce on this show has been kind of Scotch tape, and we're all navigating throughout. But it has been a very productive time. I would be remiss if to ask Joel how the last year and a half has been for you. I've seen that you've been busy in publishing.
Yeah.
The magazine is doing fantastic. But before I go into all of those details, with you being the editor of the magazine, doing fantastic books on bass players that I personally love and am inspired by, bring us up to speed how your time has been.
Well, my view, Anna, at this point is that if your loved ones are healthy and you still have a job, really everything else is details, you know. So years and years ago, when I started writing books and running a business, I basically thought, keep your horizons really tight. Yeah, just look after your family, look after your house, make sure you're a good dad. You know, try and stay healthy. And if everybody is healthy, then that's as good as it gets. So I went into this pretty focused on what my priorities were. I did get COVID about a year ago, but I had a really mild version of it. So I was just I was ill for a week and then I was exhausted for a month. But that was it. I got everything done. And books. As you know, I have two jobs. I write books and I'm the editor of Bass Player. Books wise, everything has gone better because of the pandemic, because people want to write books. People have been unable
and
to
read them. Actually,
right, that too, yeah, and actually play musical instruments as well, which is another thing. But music generally, other than people who earn their money from touring, at least the books part of it has done well, right? So people have wanted to do books and asked me to do books, so I have a whole part of them lined up for a couple of years to come. The magazine, what happened with Bass Player and all the other magazines that are published by Future Publishing, the company that runs Bass Player, the problem was that when the pandemic struck, people were unable to go and buy them physically from newsstands, so sales went down, so the budget went down. So me and my fellow editors were asked to run the magazine on a smaller budget than we had done before, which was a challenge, right? But we could all do that. It wasn't, you know, that the magazines are still well budgeted, but it was just a challenge to try and pivot and make that change. So we did that, all of us. And that was fine. That worked out okay. And that's all gone away. And now we all have our budgets back and we breathe a sigh of relief. But so these are all small details, basically. It was a challenge, but it was basically fine. And as I mentioned to you before this chat, I've got a couple of good friends who've got COVID quite badly. So it is still out there, and it is still it isn't going away anytime soon. but things overall are starting to improve a little bit. So I'm personally just grateful that it hasn't been worse, you know. So yeah, not too bad.
Sure.
And you? What about you? How's it been for you?
Thank you. It has been actually very busy. 2020, I was laughing, was the most intensive year creatively wise, and
Yeah.
it turned actually into like a trade little joke that I've been working the most for the least amount of money in my whole life, and I've been pretty much in two worlds of performing arts, in medicine, treating performers, musicians, and whatnot as
Yeah.
a licensed physiotherapist, as a stage performer. I've been doing this since age 6, so. To be honest, it has been something different because, of course, all of a sudden, many plans went, well, off the calendar very quick. It already feels like a very long time ago. We spoke briefly before we went online that somehow it feels like a million years ago. The last thing I remember before the shutdown, I had a little workshop tour,
Yeah.
Time to Rock, and I did a bunch of little cities. I taught a workshop in Paris, in Vienna, in Krakow, and in Warsaw. And flying from Paris literally on the day when they shut the border over
Yeah.
here in Warsaw, Poland. And I've been here ever since, being creative, doing shows and off in
Yeah.
person, recorded a couple of music videos. So I've been busy in a very good way. And of course, navigating and finding the challenge, how to keep mentally sane, as we all, and trying to figure out everything.
Yeah.
Me being a medical professional at the same time, I have a slightly different outlook, which is actually what brought us together. I will soon get out of the way the fact that you were so gracious to hit me up for a feature in Bass Player magazine, the autumn edition, about the medical aspect of treating people
Yeah.
in the arts and bass players. So you know what? I'll get that out of the way. Thank you so much for that. That has been
Well, let me give
indeed
that.
a bucket list moment
Well, let
of
me
the
give
year.
that an
So.
extra plug for people who are watching. So Anna was in the recent issue of Bass Player magazine
I
interviewing.
actually
Was it the
have it
Geezer
here
Butler? Weren't
handy.
there? Oh no, it's
What do
Dusty
you
Hill.
know?
It's a Dusty Hill issue. Because I'm always trying to help the community in which we work. And
I'm blushing,
as
so
Anna is
I'm
a
just gonna do
professional,
this for a
there
second.
we go. As you assist bass players with their physical health, and therefore their careers, it wasn't even a minute's thought that it was obvious that it would be really useful to have you in the magazine. So thanks for doing that for me.
The pleasure is all mine, and thank you so much again. It's a huge honor, I have to say, because next to people and all of the names and the slew of the greats that not only have influenced me to become a bass player, to be in love with
Right.
the instrument, and just kind of having them as a part of my life since ever, and the music that has been next to my heart. It's kind of a fun moment, a call to mom kind of moment, and all of your closest friends or boyfriend or that kind of thing. Like, oh my
Good.
God, look at this! How cool is this?
Great.
So
Good.
I
That's
think we
good.
rocked it pretty much. I think it turned out really, really great. So
Cool.
it
Great.
was a beautiful calendar moment, I gotta say. I still have a couple of bucket list moments in 2021 that hopefully I'm gonna scratch off the charts very soon. So fingers crossed.
Good. Fingers crossed.
But we digress. Very long answer to your short question. Thank you. I have been well. I also had people that got actually COVID ill this year, way more than last year, because
Right.
I have the feeling everybody took it a little bit more seriously, with the social distancing, with having masks on, with getting vaccinated, which is the only medical way to actually lower down and prevent death, and having a very severe process of going through the sickness of COVID-19. So that was kind of last year. I think this year is a little bit more open, because people are just really starved to get to their lifestyles back. And on one hand, I don't blame it, because you can only push it so much. But at the same time, kind of like the alertness has gone a little bit down, I observe. So as we talked, it's green and red, in terms of the world and the States and UK and over here, Central Europe. But we hope for the best. Basically, it's
always
doing what you can do, being responsible, staying responsible, disinfecting your hands a million times, which for me, quite honestly, as a medical professional, it just kind of showed how much the system, ironically, and by system I mean the medical system generally has loopholes and everything to kind of patch up and see the errors and see what can be implemented in terms of strategies throughout. To be honest, you were saying, Joel, about bass player health and a professional approach towards that complexity. It is a high maintenance profession. It's like athletic sports, just the money could be a little bit different, because in Olympics, all of the players, all of the athletes, of course, have a nutritionist, they have a trainer, they have a physio, they have 2 leading physicians, if not more. So they have this kind of bubble around them, and they have management. Still, in performing arts medicine, I find that there is a huge lack, not only of knowledge, and ironically to that, in London, I'm having one player that actually reached out to me quite recently, and he has problems playing. And to be honest, doing telemed sessions with him, of course, that's one of those things that we do, hanging out with people and also doing the treatment protocols right now, and any kind of consults when they're not possible in person. He lacked basic knowledge being in music school, from warm up to awareness of your own body, how to warm up, how to cool down, what the biomechanics are. I would like to think that every school program, be it university level or under, would have that awareness. But at the same time, it leaves a lot for us, for people like me in the field, to kind of implement that. And that I'm very excited for, because it all comes out of my practice at the same time that I've done the last 20 years as a performer, as a medical professional. So it's just wherever that's available, I try to just send the message out and bring the awareness, which I think is the most important, to raise the awareness about everything like that. And just share.
I used to run I had a monthly column in Bass Player years ago, from a guy who was a bass player, and he was a personal trainer. That was it. So it wasn't as advanced as your knowledge of the subject, but it was just a small, like almost like a paragraph. One thing you can do this month, just one thing to improve your health as a bass player. And I'm sure there was lots of stretching. We talked a lot about strap height, stuff like that. So the magazine has gone a little bit into that subject, but I think it's always valuable to keep repeating it and refreshing it.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Basically, the problem nowadays is that everybody seems to have a professional expertise, not necessarily having the proper education and experience in it, and especially not to dismiss trainers or people that are doing a great job within their field, but I feel that it's very often not enough, and the open market of training and courses, from Pilates to stretching to nutritionists to what have you, any kind of profession that basically is open up to market just to make an intensive course and be certified, quote unquote, whatever that means, does not cover a professional education, especially that requires such very specified approach towards performers. I actually started in the field working with dancers, because that was a huge loophole. Dancers, ballet dancers, performers, and one of the main issues that they were always coming back to me, if I can stretch low enough, touching my toes with my hands, the doctor goes, "You're healthy. I don't see a problem there. Why are you even seeing me?" So that kind of dismissal already on stage one, whereas the problem turned out into be a stress fracture of some sort, or anything that was building up over years. And the same with bass players. You were asking me in the magazine, what are the basic injuries? Oh, good God, where do I start?
Actually, you said a fantastic thing in your interview, where you said, say someone presents to you with an arm problem. You don't look at the arm, you look at all the things, the systems that lead to the arm, right? And
exactly.
It could be a dehydration problem, or it could be a balance problem, or it could be something completely that you would not spot yourself.
Not the most obvious thing that you would aim for. Exactly. I mean, unless you see an open wound and blood is gushing and you see it literally as an acute injury to be administered. Look, pain is the last place that I look in. And it's funny because actually, what is pain? Pain is a signal. It's like the signal of a plugged bass into an amp. It gives a certain static. The more unprecise it is, the more feedback you get, the louder it gets. If you keep ignoring it and not fix the problem, it will act out. And usually that's the most precise language that the body has with us, saying, hello, something's wrong, please address it. And then the fun starts. And as you said, it could be dehydration, it could be nutrition, it could be the blood flow, it could be nerve supplementing the joint itself or the spine segment. It could be psychological, psychosomatic issues, especially with performers, is a huge issue because we are, and they are, and by we, I mean the whole community, sensitive people. And by that, the psychosomatic element comes into play. That's why we have a huge issue with depression and mental sickness and abusive personalities and issues with alcohol and drugs and all of that. It's a huge package. And that's why if you look at the bass player, it's not only the chops and the licks and the incredible techniques, but it's a huge part behind it that makes him so or her so.
Yeah, I've been thinking in global terms as I get older about what makes people what we conventionally think of as good or bad, or hard work or not hard work. And the way I've come to think of it is how much damage has a person taken mentally.
That's an excellent question. I have to write
because
this down, actually.
like from childhood, you know, like I've written. So as you know, well, this leads me into the conversation about writing books with people, right? So one of the things I do, in fact, what I mostly do now as a book author, on top of being a magazine editor, is write books with people. So I'm the co-writer of people's autobiographies. So I've done that 10 or 12 times now, and each one of those requires, you know, a year or more's worth of involvement and deep engagement with these people. And so, although I'm not a trained psychiatrist or therapist, the role overlaps with those sciences. And you start to realize that people enter adulthood with a greater or lesser degree of damage from their childhoods. Some fortunate people with none, most of us with a little, and some people with a large amount of damage. Now, how does that then manifest in their adult behavior and their relationships and their creativity? And quite often it fuels creativity, as we know, right? But also it makes people difficult to be around, and it makes people difficult to love. And so I've worked with people of varying degrees of damage. Maybe damage is the wrong word. It could be I don't know. I'll think of another word.
Challenge. Not to call it trauma because it's not a therapeutic podcast or chat today, but challenge. I mean, as you exactly say, some people are fortunate to have a clear kind of upbringing and not taking out of their childhood any kind of bad experiences that later on, if not addressed in any way, they would start to act out in one way or another. I mean, even the bass player that we didn't mention, Frank Bello, bass player that I absolutely love. Frank is absolutely an awesome human being, great musician, and just the coolest sweetheart. But like in the book that literally just premiered a couple of days ago, if I'm not mistaken, Fathers, Brothers and Sons.
That's it. Yeah, it comes out on November the 2nd, but journalists have been reviewing it and talking about it now for the last few weeks. Yeah, it's turned out so well, that book, and you're absolutely right about Frank. One of the nicest guys I've ever met in music world or outside. Shall I talk about that for a moment, that book?
Sure, absolutely. Let's plug the book and talk about one of my favorite bass players next to Billy Sheehan, David Ellefson. Long list. There is no tape enough.
Right. Yeah. And when I was a kid in the 80s, that was all I listened to, all that stuff. And I would listen to Anthrax. For those who don't know, Frank Bello was the bass player in the thrash metal band Anthrax, this band. And he has that style of music is not renowned for its particularly elaborately melodic bass style, although Cliff Burton of Metallica is a very stark exception to that rule. And also Frank as well. So Frank used to play this incredible melodic stuff, which used to really, really appeal to me. Always a big fan of his music and his bass playing. And then when the opportunity came, probably around 2007, to interview him for a magazine, I did so, and we kept bumping into each other, and I kept interviewing him again and again. And in about 2010, when I was working with David Ellefson on his book, I got to know Frank through David. And the idea, I think I suggested a book to Frank. Why don't we do a book? It must be 5-6 years ago now. And we did most of the interviews. The deal got signed in 2020. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but recently, with a really cool book publisher in LA called Rare Bird. And then the book was
Rare
written.
Bird. That's so appropriate, I have to say.
Yeah.
I love the name.
It's great, right? You should check out their backlist. They do these amazing books. Like, this is a publisher that will happily do a book about thrash metal, and then they'll do a book on Jeff Buckley, right? So it's not, there is
wide
no
spectrum. Nice.
right. There is no there's no sort of creative barriers there, in terms of what they'll cover. So yeah, so the book got done. It's called Fathers, Brothers, and Sons. What did I call it? Surviving Anguish,
Anguish,
Abandonment,
Anthrax,
and
and
Anthrax.
Abandonment. Yeah, the other way.
Right.
Abandonment and Anthrax. Yes.
That was the one. Anthrax.
So clever. Another catchy one. I love
good,
the title.
good. Yeah.
It just covers everything.
Didn't take me long to come up with that, but I'm glad about that. And we called it Fathers, Brothers, and Sons because it really is a very different book. Frank has had well, we just talked about childhood trauma. I mean, he had the full dose. His father abandoned the family when he was little. He was one of 5 kids, and you can Google any recent podcast that Frank has done because he talked about this in great detail, and he should really be the one to talk about it. But he carried a full load of resentment and anger into his adult years, which obviously fueled all the metal he played, really well. But unusually has left him a really nice guy. He's not a bitter guy. He talks very honestly about the sort of rage that he has inside. But he's been through therapy and he's in control of it, and he talks about it and he deals with it. And he's just a fascinating character, but also a very, very nice one. You won't meet anybody who says, I don't like Frank Bello. So the book got done and it's out. Well, today we're now in mid-October, so in 2 weeks it'll be out. And he's done an audio book.
Get the book, guys. Get the book.
Please do. I'd appreciate that. So yeah, that's the newest book, and that is my 34th, I think, in 22 years, something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a whole section.
That's a funny number. I'm going to give this away. I've literally, you've written and co-written the amount of books, the amount of years I've been on this planet. So
there you go. There, yeah. One for every year. Yeah. So the first one came out in 2000, and then I've written consistently since then, as well as being a magazine editor.
How did it start, Joel, by the way? What made you find this voice and this ability? Because I have to say, being a writer, especially on a complexity with, well, musicians, as we know, are not necessarily normal people, not necessarily sane people oftentimes, in the most positive of ways. But where did you find that along the way? And my second question following that, what was the initial inspiration and love for the bass, which is not the most common and kind of normal instrument to reach for out of all?
Well, the bass came first. So I was 16 or 17 maybe, quite late actually. And a friend of mine called John Hoare from over the road in a little village in Somerset in southwest England, where I grew up. I had a pretty happy, relaxed childhood, but not a very rock and roll one, because it was a sedate one. Quite like the life I live now, actually. And
that's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm happy with it.
It's totally fine.
But I didn't go to London till I was 10. The biggest city nearby was Bristol, which is quite a big place and quite a cultural force actually. But I got into metal and into playing bass at the same time when I was 17, again through my friend John, and who interviewed me for his podcast the other day. Actually, it was kind of funny. He went on to be a professional bass player, which was cool. So I started playing bass when I was at school. I never got very good. I'm good enough, like I'm a decent bass player, but not a fantastic one.
Not Billy Sheehan playing with 3 fingers. Good God, that man is an alien.
Yeah, I was backstage with him a few years ago. I was backstage with him, interviewing him. We were sitting on the sofa in the dressing room, and I said, "What's the most challenging thing you know how to play?" And he looked at me and did this tapped Bach piece that was so fiendishly difficult that I had no idea what was going on. And it was hilarious. He was, it was funny. It was a stupid question actually, but it was kind of funny. So yeah, he's amazing. And then I did my degree, and didn't really do anything really for the rest of my 20s that was productive at all. So when I got my first job as a journalist, and that was on a magazine called Record Collector in London,
Mhm.
I was sort of like springing into life. I think I was 28. I was 28, and all my friends were buying houses and becoming management and living a proper adult life, and I really had done
Whatever
nothing
that
my
means.
whole yeah. I mean, I was just doing nothing at the time, and I thought, right, I'm a journalist now. I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to try and get some books out. And I kind of had this major work ethic, which has continued until now. So, in answer to your question, I was a journalist on a magazine, and when you're in that position, if you have ideas for books, then they tend to be taken seriously. So as a result, I was able to get my first book deal in 2000. And when that book did well, then I was offered another one, and so on and so on,
And then it
until
snowballed.
it
Awesome.
did. And in 2004, I had a book about Metallica, which was a bestseller in certain countries and did really, really well. And when that happens, then you have a ton of book deals. So I quit my job at Record Collector because I had work lined up for a few years, and it tied in really well with my daughter. Our oldest child was born around that time, so it was cool because I could be at home and be there when she was little. Um, and that was wow, my God, that was 16, nearly 17 years ago. And I've worked from home ever since then. Even though I am also now the editor of Bass Player magazine, I do it from home, apart from meetings with the publisher every now and then. So that I think that answers your question more or less. Um, I didn't really do anything until I became a journalist, and then I did everything. I started writing books.
That's
I've
awesome.
written one or
I
two
love
books per year.
extremes because it's this kind of extreme. It's maybe
Yeah,
something waiting for you long
right.
enough until all of a sudden it just skyrockets, and then you have to
Yeah.
scratch your calendar because basically whatever you say turns into a book, so you have to watch what you're saying. That's
Well,
awesome. I mean, I
I
find
mean, yeah.
I find that so fascinating always with not maybe not career choices, because many times the things that we end up doing professionally in life have kind of found us,
Yeah.
and we had absolutely no say in it, kind of in the cards type of
Yeah,
thing.
that often happens. That's happened a few times to me. So I was rolling along as a magazine editor and a freelance journalist. I'm sorry, as a magazine contributor and a freelance journalist. And then in 2012, um, the publisher of Bass Guitar magazine, an English magazine, asked me if I wanted to be the editor of the mag. And I said yes. And from there, I became the editor of Bass Player magazine that I now am. So it was just that one decision that has made fairly a profound impact on my life. And it's been great, I have to say. But yeah, it wasn't what I had in mind. I'm very glad that it happened, but it wasn't what I planned for. I didn't have in my mind that I was going to be a magazine editor.
Was
Um,
there
uh,
a plan B ever, or a C even?
I would have been a teacher. I was a teacher for 4 years before I became a journalist, and now actually I do a tiny bit of part-time teaching
Hmm.
at BIM, the colleges here in England.
Hmm. Yeah.
I teach a journalism course, and a couple of years ago I taught it was called Cultural Perspective, so it was politics in rock music,
Hmm.
and that's really my motivation for doing that is I don't need another job, and I don't, what am I trying to say? I don't need the money that much that I would want to do it.
You're
But
doing well.
yeah, but teaching is the point is that teaching is a whole other experience, and it's completely immersive, and it's by far the greatest opportunity I've had professionally for any kind of personal development, because when you teach, your responsibility is really heavy. You have to do it right, and you're responsible for people's development. It's not just you anymore; it's other people. So you have to take it seriously, and you have to do it well, all the time. You can't. It's not easy to take it easy as a teacher. You have to do it properly, and this is at university level as well. So it's serious stuff.
Mm. Yeah, I just
So
wanted to ask,
in
which age
yeah.
group are
Oh,
you teaching?
these are students. So these are
Students. Yeah.
18 to 21. So it's university students. So it's in a way, it's a little discipline thing that I do. I do it for that reason because it keeps you sharp, and it pushes me in ways that my other jobs don't do. But I only literally do an hour and a half of teaching a week at the moment. But nonetheless, I take that course very seriously, and I think some of my students might be watching this now. But it's something that you cannot mess about with. I recommend it to everyone. It really sharpens you up and gives you skills that you would never expect.
I agree. Well, I teach as well, and to be honest, I couldn't agree more on the responsibility part, because you never know who's alive directly or potential career you're
Yeah,
influencing with one word, with one task, with one discussion, even as we're having now, like on whatever topic and matter. And
yeah,
then
yeah.
you are forming a brand new human being,
Right.
potentially stepping up into the games right now,
Yeah,
and maybe they stick to it and not. I even remember from early on the teachers that influenced me and kind of
you'll never
triggered the
forget them.
passion for
Yeah,
learning. You never
yeah.
forget them.
Not a
They
good.
were the
You
ones
never
that
forget a good teacher or a bad teacher. You
exactly, yes.
forget all the ones in the middle.
Well, speaking of bad teacher, like I have to say, this music has been initially killed for me, like the
Oh yeah.
passion for learning music at age 7, because the primary teacher, when I came back from the States, I was in San Diego from age 4 till almost 8ish. And in the States, we start education earlier. We start at 5, 6. That's kind of preschool and primary school. And then in Europe, most of the countries like Poland, Austria, we start at age 7, um, the first grade. And I remember today the teacher that was our main leading teacher in primary school was also a mathematician.
Yeah.
And it just killed my passion like right away. The stuff that we had to learn, like something on cymbals, something on a flute, but given in the most dry and unpassionate way. And the
Yeah.
rebel of a child that I was, hyper and all over the place, I was like, oh my God, help me. So then it just kind of snowballed, and music found me in a different way than
Yeah.
later as a choreographer, and then later as a guitar player, self-taught, just kind of reaching for it. And then the bass knocked on the door and said, hey, this is what you're meant to do. So
Yeah.
it's the funniest thing, especially when it comes to teaching and early experiences. Speaking of, coming
Yeah.
back to the discussion we had previously, like the influences from before that you had, do
Yeah.
you remember like your first gig and attending whatever was available, as a teen, over at yours?
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up, like I said, near a city called Bristol, and we used to go in the late 80s to see just blues bands and pub bands, nothing major. The first big gig I ever went to, actually, there were two. It was in the summer of '88. The first one was to see Level 42
Hmm.
in Birmingham, which is a couple of hours away. And I remember that really clearly because Mark King flew around the stage, and his status bass had all the LEDs up the neck. And then
Yeah.
the second big gig I went to was Donington in '88,
Wow.
Monsters of Rock. Yeah, it was incredible. It
That's a
was,
that's a good leap.
oh my God, it was like, it blew my mind. It was,
I can
I
imagine.
remember it really clearly. To this day, I remember it really clearly. The first band was Halloween. Then it
Hmm.
was um, Guns N' Roses, believe it or not, in
Decent
'88.
lineup.
Yeah, right. And I still remember um, the beginning of Sweet Child of Mine. I remember, and no one really knew who they were. It was the maddest
At the
thing.
time, after,
Yeah.
and then they exploded. Yeah.
Then it was Megadeth, and I remember trying to watch what David Ellison was doing with his fingers as he played bass because I was a fan.
I
I was
remember
a
that
fan
solo.
already.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
another one. Yeah.
yeah. And then it was Dave Lee Roth, who had gone solo from Van Halen, and I think he had Steve Vai playing guitar. And then it was Kiss, believe it or not headlining, right? That Kiss in a
Hmm.
non-headline position was
Yeah,
super
yeah, yeah,
rare.
yeah.
And then
Super
it was
rare.
Iron Maiden on the Seventh Son of the Seventh Son tour. It was like incredible. And I remember
Setting the
really,
bar over
oh
here.
my God. And they also set the bar for volume. I remember standing, I
For
was at
sure.
least 100 meters away, and it was really, really hitting my stomach, the bass. And I remember counting the 4x10 Marshall cabs on either side of the stage, and there was 120 on either side, on both sides.
Right.
So it was not. I mean, probably the majority weren't plugged in, but it was
No,
it was pretty
obviously
nuts
not,
to see.
but
And so
still
for
the
my
mass
yeah,
going
for
at
my
you, right?
17-year-old self, that was pretty amazing. And then I yeah, through university I did all the obvious metal stuff, and I remember seeing Prince, and I saw Lenny Kravitz, all the bands of the day. But I was also playing in bands myself as well all the way through. Not any well-known bands or anything that wasn't basically a cheesy covers band, but I did that the whole time, and that's quite good for you. It's good for your self-discipline, and I don't think I realised until later years what it means to be a good band member. To turn up to rehearsal ready to go, not to turn up to rehearsal to find out how the songs go, which I definitely did. I would turn up and say, well, what is it then? What are the chords? Which is just annoying. But I definitely made all those rookie errors for the first year or two. But I always liked it. It was always such good fun. But
at the same time, Joel, sorry to interrupt, it's one of
no,
those things that you never get a university degree in. No one teaches you the practice of being a
well,
performing
not
artist.
then. They do it at BIM. They totally do it at BIM now. They
Right,
teach
like
you
right now that
how
you
to
know
be it.
what
Yeah,
it
yeah.
means. Yes, but
Whereas
back in
back
the day, you
then,
just
no.
winged it. I mean, you just learned from experience. If you all of
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sudden the band didn't call you in the next day, obviously someone got annoyed for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's why.
And the
So,
practice rooms. My son is a drummer, and I take him to a local rehearsal room, and we jam together on drums and bass. He's an
oh,
amazing
nice.
drummer, and it's completely clean. It's like beautiful, smells nice. And I remember the practice rooms in the 80s were horrible, right? Like there were puddles of beer everywhere and like cigarettes on the floor and
And a lot of
the
DNA everywhere, stuff you don't want
right,
to
yeah,
touch.
right.
I
And
know.
all the drum heads were broken and the bass amp probably didn't work, and if it did, it made a terrible noise, and all the instruments were shit. And it was fun actually, but that's
Of
all
course,
gone
yeah.
now. That's
The
gone
raw
now.
reality of things, yeah.
Yeah, I liked it. It felt quite rock and roll, but yeah, it's all gone now. Thank God, things are a bit more professional.
They
Different
cleaned up, they
times.
changed the carpets.
Oh my God, can you imagine sticky carpets?
In some places, not. I mean, the legacy just carries on, like the Rainbow or yeah, the Viper Club, like what have you, like all of them. They're
I was there actually.
saturated
I
in
went
this
to those
sweat.
places. Last time I was at the NAMM show
Mhm.
was right before COVID, so January 2020,
Oh yeah,
and we had an evening in Hollywood, and I went to the Rainbow and the Viper Room and the Whiskey,
and the
and
whiskey.
I like the Rainbow. I've been there a bunch of times, and that's a fun place. But the other two I thought were just awful. Like this. I mean, admittedly, Hollywood in January is not the best time to go, but they were just kind of
Not the best choice.
those were depressing places. I've yet to find the touristy side of Hollywood exciting. I understand if you go away from the Sunset Strip, and you go to other
Yeah.
places, it's more fun. But yeah. No, it's still, if you're English, it's to be in Hollywood is the most amazing thing anyway. Just to be there. I never would have dreamt of going there when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, right? That you either read in magazines or on
Yeah,
covers or see on
yeah,
TV. It's one of those unreachable things. And the moment you kind of face the experience, it's like, oh, okay, well,
yeah. It was
either
like
matches the expectation or not necessarily. So,
I thought it was going to be like a Motley Crue video, and it really wasn't. And it was
and it
like going
really
down a
wasn't. No.
boring town street. But I
Well,
will say the rainbow is nice.
quite quite honestly, for all of the hype. I mean, I haven't lived through the hype. I was too little to live through it.
Yeah,
I was back in San Diego with my parents doing dry figure eight skating on carpets at lobbies. But I kind of did my one of little showcases in Las Vegas, being a little kid and just like
very
kind of
nice.
being around with my parents. And then that triggered attention, and I kind of liked it. So I figured, hey, this could be kind of fun. And of course, it snowballed from there because either it would go to martial arts and just beating the crap out of people, which I actually did back in school. I was hitting boys. Now I love hanging out with them and I like boys much more. But back then I was just a terrible kid. And years later, no wonder Rebel Crush sticks to me as a new solo metal project. So it's kind of
Right.
full historic circle. But
Judo when I was a teenager. I quite enjoyed that.
oh really?
Yeah,
Nice.
it was like a really peaceful martial art.
Relatively.
Yeah.
That's funny. I was actually
Mm,
doing Aikido for a very short period of time. I liked it because it was defensive. Like any punch that would go towards you, you would turn around into defense. And all of a sudden, you did one motion, bloop, and the guy would be on the mat. It was
yeah.
bringing so much satisfaction and so much joy because I'm a relatively peaceful person. I don't like fights, I don't like aggression. I love
Mm,
aggressive music. I love
mm,
metal and heavy metal, and I play with a pig because it fits my personality.
yeah.
But in
Sure.
real life, I'm very much love peace, rock and roll. Not necessarily so much hippie, but yeah. So that kind of brought me joy. Hey, I'm not doing much, but the guy is down. Perfect.
Yeah. Talking of Aikido, I interviewed Steven Seagal once. Um,
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, it was hilarious because what was I was doing it for a blues magazine. There was a
Okay.
magazine here called either The Blues or just Blues, and he is a musician, right? He has a touring blues band,
Yeah, yeah.
and I just
Not
wanted
many
to talk
people
about.
know of that, actually.
No, no,
I
why
think
would
it's
they?
like the most
Like,
bizarre connection.
I know, right? I just wanted to talk about all those terrible films from the 80s. I can't remember what they were called. What was the one with Tommy Lee Jones? Under Siege, right? And
Other things, yes.
they were like
Um,
the sort of most low grade
Low
Sylvester
budget kind
Stallone,
of
sub
box
Arnold
office
Schwarzenegger.
60.
Well, no, there was a lot of budget. That those things were very highly budgeted, but they were just so crap. And
Yeah, they
but if
turned
you,
out poor. That was always my question.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
how
But
do you do that? You have so much
if
money for that.
you're a kid in the 80s who liked action films and who didn't, then Steven Seagal was like this hero.
I
Um,
know.
and I used to read up on his Aikido that he did. I think it was Aikido. And
It
like
was. Yeah.
he took it to this insanely high level. And then I interviewed him about his blues band. It was really funny. He's a strange man nowadays, though. Good friends with Vladimir Putin. Very, very unusual fellow. Very, very hard to get your head around. So it was just funny and surreal.
I can imagine.
I phoned his cell phone. That was it. And said, and he said, Seagal. And I went, oh, hey, hey, hey. And we had this funny conversation. That is one of the stranger aspects of this job.
Encounters.
Meeting these people, yeah, meeting these completely wacky people. I've met a
What
few
was it
people like that.
for? Like out of publishing, is it possible to like find it anywhere still in like archives or
No, I'll scan it in.
you burnt it? You burned
No,
it
no,
all.
I was proud of it. I was like, no, I genuinely I was proud of it. I was like, how do you interview someone who's what do I want to say? He's an unusual fellow, but interesting. You know, he's an interesting fellow. Um, how do you turn that into a coherent magazine piece? And I did. So no, I'm pleased with it. Um, no, I'll scan it in and send it to you. I don't think it's online, but maybe I should put it online because it's actually not that interesting. It's just him talking about his blues music and his guitar collection. But it would have been much more fun if I could have asked him about, his friend in the Kremlin, and stuff like
For
that. But,
sure. Well, it
so
could
there you
be
go.
a fun piece. Yeah, maybe you should publish it. I mean,
I'll find it. I'll
amongst
dig it out.
Frank Bello and David Olofsson and Glenn
Yeah, fits
Hughes,
well.
that could be a fun little vignette, if you will, because
Yeah,
that's
right.
quite rare. You've obviously stuck. I don't mean stuck, but you're heading into like this preference of really heavy music and metal, and
Hmm,
it speaks very much to kind of your soul, how I perceive your writing, because as I was
right.
telling you before we went on, I find your writing so organic and kind of so fitting to who you're writing with that it's
Thank you.
seamless. You're not overstepping on anybody, but you have this external eye over somebody's life and towards somebody's experience in life, which is not only for one thing respectful, for other oftentimes entertaining, and it's hard to find that voice that kind of fits. And yeah, I just find it great. I love the book with
Well,
David
thank you.
Olofsson. I love the
Oh,
one
that's
with Glenn Hughes, and I'm looking forward to reading the one with Frank Bello as well, because that one will be killer for sure. Like, not even
yeah.
reading
Turned
into
out
it for
well.
sure, I feel that it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, are you gonna like
And
it?
well, it's going to
Yeah.
be extremes, considering
Yeah.
Frank's life, of course. And
Yeah, there's a lot of emotional stuff in there. Well, thank you for saying those things. And I think the
of course,
way that you don't intrude your voice on the voice of whoever is doing the autobiography you're working on is that I have that ability because I'm a magazine editor, so I understand about uh, inserting the correct voice and when would be um, appropriate to put in my voice and not his. In fact, there's a funny story that what did we do? We were finishing off Frank's book. And the first line of that book, after the introduction, is, "As my friend Dimebag used to say, let's go." So that's the first. That's the first line, right? As my friend Dimebag used to say, let's go. And it
nice.
was just a cool line to start with, right?
It's an awesome
But
line.
but
That's my
I
life
kind of
philosophy. Let's go,
right.
action.
But I came up with it, and my initial the way I initially worded it was, as my dear friend Dimebag used to say, let's go. I put the word dear in, and Frank messaged me and said,
What the hell, man?
um, Joel, my dear friend is kind of English, and I'm from New York,
I'm from New York.
and I said, yeah, you're right. I'll take the deer out because
I'll take it back.
sometimes that can happen without you thinking. Your own cultural background can be inappropriate, and weirdly, because I've worked with so many Americans, I've had to understand. I've had to familiarize myself with a bunch of American cultural norms and traditions that I otherwise would not have done. So, for example, I had to understand what is it, K through 13, that kind of expression. It's about the school system from kindergarten to, it can't be 13.
Yeah.
Like and the fact that all schools have a number, like I went to public school 138.
Well, that's another thing, the abbreviations.
Yeah,
It could
we never
mean
get that
anything.
here.
I mean,
Yeah, totally.
I'm polyamory Swedish, and for me, it's even oftentimes like it could mean
Polyamory
anything,
Swedish.
really.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
No, it's great. I mean, but I remember when I was a teacher
Part
years
two.
and years ago, we used to talk about cross-cultural, what was the phrase? Cross-cultural interference, where your own background can be inserted inappropriately into something that's not about your background. So that's funny sometimes. Sometimes that'll happen. Spellings have to change, punctuation has to change.
Of course.
British English grammar is different from American English grammar. But I'm familiar with that because Bass Player is published in UK and US editions. So the UK version is published first, and then they Americanize it. But I
didn't know that.
I'm sure,
actually, in that order. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
I'm sure some American person reads it and goes, "Well, that sounds a bit English," a bit. But so we have to take out the specifically English cultural references, like if there's a name of a particular candy bar you only get in England, right? You wouldn't put that in, or a TV show, that kind of thing. So we it's an interesting phenomenon, this idea of cross-cultural interference. I've always thought.
For sure, and it makes you learn constly. It's
Massively.
never ending, to be honest.
It's just the way it should be. You should be a global citizen if you can be, and what did you say? Polyamory Swedish?
Polyamory Swede, yeah.
That's amazing. So which
cool,
which one do you identify with most?
Depending on the hour of the day, to be honest.
Right, yeah.
You know what? It's funny because like with either interviews, like we do those, or talks or meets and greets, or even just in random conversation, like in my medical practice, like people ask me, so where are you from? Because my accent sometimes is not necessarily clear where it's from, or my name is hard to pronounce and whatnot. And it just makes me kind of laugh and think, hey, it's interesting because no one ever really asks you, are you happy? Are you satisfied with life? Is what you're doing like fulfilling? And I just think like, to hell with labels. I mean, I don't care if you're black, red, or purple, as long as you're a good human being and all of that. But to answer your question, I'll have to think about it and get back to you in part 2. How about that?
Okay, that's fine.
We'll leave a little bit of mystique towards the end. So.
Right.
And we're actually running out of time. I could hang out with you and just talk for hours about bass and music and just creativity.
We'll do that in part 2. Like you say, we'll do it in part 2.
Yes, very much so. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe McIver, without G.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Awesome. Guys, please make sure to check out all of the upcoming books, and especially the one with Frank Bello, and also get your supplies. That's a tough word. Supplies of Bass Player Mag. Thank you, Joe.
All right, lovely. Thank you, everyone.
Walk on. Thank you, guys. See you next time.